Good morning and welcome to another edition of A Closer Look. I'm your host, Linda Fontaine. Today, I have the privilege of interviewing Jeff Fleming, City of Kingsport City Manager.
Yes,
Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, first of all, Jeff, tell us, what is your job specifically? What does a city manager do?
Okay, so back when they invented city management form of government, it was called the Model City Charter. So a lot of folks think that Kingsport's named the Model City because of the plan, and that's part of it, but the real reason is they adopted the Rockefeller Foundation Model City Charter. The Model City Charter calls for a city manager. So the difference in a city manager city and other cities is that the city manager is professionally hired, you're interviewed just like any other job, you can live anywhere in the country and they can bring you here. If you run for mayor, for example, you have to live here already. So the idea was go find the best person you can for the job, no matter where they live. And so our mayor only makes like $3,200 a year. And in all city manager cities are the same way. So a lot of folks assume that the mayor is the CEO of the city, but actually the city manager is the CEO of the city. And I serve as at the pleasure of the Board of Mayor and Aldermen, and as does my counterpart in Bristol and the counterpart in Johnson City. So if at any time they decide they want to make a change, they can do that. I'm not entitled to any, labor review boards or civil service contracts, anything like that. I serve completely at their pleasure. And then all other employees of the city report to me. So I technically hire and fire the police chief, fire chief, public works director, assistant city manager, those kinds of things.
So you are the big kahuna.
It's a $200 million. it's a $200 million business that we're running, the city of Kingsport.
Wow.
And so the difference, just by comparison, if you're looking at county government, like the sheriff is elected, the highway department is elected, the trustee, the mayor, they're all elected differently. And so that means they all report directly to the electorate. So the mayor of Sullivan County doesn't have any direct authority over any of the employees. So it really, you understand some of the challenges that they face when you're trying to run a business like Sullivan County, for example, and you really don't have any authority. So
wow,
it's an interesting, once you really realize some of the structural ways that government is set up in Tennessee, you understand why the elected officials get frustrated at times with what they're trying to accomplish.
I really think it'd be important to learn this in our schools.
Yeah.
We really should have, it's good to have a civics class to teach about our country's government, but to know at least how your own city operates.
Right. We were talking the other day with the school superintendent about that very thing. Somewhere along the way, we made a decision as a country that we wanted to focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And the more emphasis we put on those things, the more we squeezed out geography, social studies, civics, those kinds of things. And I was kind of making an observation. I said, Nikki Haley, who was a great governor of South Carolina, is now our representative to the United Nations. What do our delegates know about other countries and all of the things that you would learn in a civics or geography type class? And are you just put in a situation where you've never really even had any background in that kind of thing because we were busy teaching science, technology, engineering, and math?
And I know it's important to learn the STEM classes, especially then when engineering and classes like that are so important to development and all for our country. But that's not to say the other things aren't important. When you ask somebody where a country is or even what your state capital is or anything, and they don't know, we need to really kind of make more of a balance. I think if people want to go into the science, technology, and math and all that sort of thing, maybe at some point in high school they can choose to take more of those classes.
Well, it's interesting that we've been hearing a lot lately from Mark Costa at Eastman was giving his regional leaders breakfast, and he was talking about the differences between the Trump administration and the Obama administration. And Trump is a business person, Obama was more of a community servant type that came up through the ranks of government. And it takes a melting pot of all types to form a government, but when you're in that governmental position, you have a lot of authority to pass laws that have trickle-down impacts on corporate businesses. And so Mr. Costa was talking about how it has gotten so much better for corporations in terms of profitability and those kinds of things because of some of the perspectives. So, we need to get our scientists and our engineers more educated on civics if they're going to get involved, and we need to get our folks that know about civics more informed about government and the decisions that they make that are impacting economic development and every single day, because they have a lot of power in that position.
And these classes don't have to be one or the other.
Right.
They really should be all melded together.
Yeah.
This is why this is important to learn this, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and make it all a complete learning experience. Yeah, that would be important, because I really didn't realize that you were, the big boss man.
Well, it's, my grandmother used to say, and there's so much wisdom in the things our grandparents taught us, but she always said all things in moderation. Now, she wasn't talking about alcohol, because she didn't believe in any moderation there.
But she didn't believe
but it's all things in moderation.
Yes.
It's you have to be well-rounded. And
I agree.
And unfortunately, from my perspective, when I go down to deal with government situations, everything is so polarized, and it's like, we don't talk to them, we don't do this, we do that, and you're like, there's got to be give and take all the way around to get things done.
There really does.
And so I just don't ever believe in shutting the door on anybody or any perspective. You need to be well-rounded to be able to make an informed decision.
And I remember reading something by Marilyn Savant. Remember, she used to have an article in the paper years ago. Yeah. And I remember something she said. I was just in middle school, I think, at the time. And she said, a sign of intelligence is being open-minded.
Yeah, exactly.
And I remember that stuck with me as a young person, and that really kind of helped form how I thought about things, because she was so brilliant. She had, her last name was Savant, and she was a savant. She had the highest IQ. She's in the Guinness Book of World Records. I remember thinking she was so wise. And that really left an impact in me. Because I thought, if we have an open mind, even if we feel strongly about one thing, to just sit back and listen to what somebody else has to say. Sure. Oh, well, that makes sense. Let me rethink this. Yeah.
Well, we were talking about what it was like to grow up in Kingsport with some friends the other day. And I said, I remember going to the Civic Auditorium, and there would be these travel logs. And folks from Eastman, generally, with the film and photography and all that, they would have been, to the Matterhorn. And we would all come, from the community and just see these crisp images of cultures from around the world, and we were exposed to things that we never would have been exposed to otherwise. And I believe it fundamentally changed a lot of people's perspectives about where we are, how we fit in, what is relative, globally, and it certainly impacted a little boy like me that had never been anywhere in terms of keeping an open mind, and then once you have that open mind, then you can really just absorb every bit of knowledge that comes your way, and it
does open more doors for you when you really decide to change your thinking on not being stubborn or headstrong in one area. Well, this is the way I am. I've always been that way. Can't help it. No, just have an open mind, and great things can happen. Ideas, knowledge is power.
We've always done it that way. It's my. I hate that statement. We've always done it that way.
I know.
Let's talk about why we did it that way and how we can change it.
Just because you always do it that way doesn't mean it's the best.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, tell me. What's going on with Kingsport?
Well, we just finished our first century, and when you think about the building a city from scratch, my grandmother lived in McFeeder's Bend near Churchill, and it was across the river. And I had the benefit of getting to talk to her in her later years, and she died when she was 103. Wow. And I said,
good for her.
She was in the second class ever admitted to East Tennessee State. Oh. And I said, how did you get there? And she said, well, we crossed the river, we caught a train in Churchill, we went to Gate City and changed trains, went to Bristol and changed trains, and went to Johnson City. And I said, why didn't you go through Kingsport? She said, honey, there wasn't a Kingsport. There was nothing here. So, think about that for a minute. What if you just go carve out of the wilderness a city, and you have to provide all the infrastructure and all the buildings and all the people and all the jobs and everything, and all that took place in one person's lifetime. And so during that time period, just for interest, throw in the fact that we had World War I in 1917 when we were incorporated, then we had the stock market crash, and we had the Depression, and then we had World War II. And so for the first half of those 100 years, we were fighting international conflicts, and things were being rationed. The materials that you could use to build streets, concrete, the piping for water infrastructure and that kind of thing, you were having to use materials that weren't otherwise needed for the war effort. So we have a whole city of infrastructure that was built with what you could use that wasn't needed for the war effort. So we used to have Old Faithful, the water line would explode out of Market Street just because it was a cast iron pipe. You wouldn't use cast iron pipe for water, but that's all you could use for water during that time period. So we've had to kind of go back and rebuild a lot of that infrastructure over that period of time, and it's been an interesting journey to watch that. So now as we go into our next 100 years, it's like we're actually a city of 53,000 people, and most of the first 100 years we were dependent on large industries that folks would want to go in and work. Somebody needs to hire me, and now it's much more of an entrepreneurial environment. It's people can live anywhere and work from their home. So our school board president's job was at Groupon in San Francisco, but he would travel out there like once a month just to check in, but otherwise he was here in Kingsport. Our mayor's job is technically, the North American location is in Greenville, but his company is in Belgium. But he chose to live here. So it's just not as simple as it used to be that you come out of high school and go work in the plant, because automation has come along, robotics. So we've got to teach people how to be more efficient, and that's where that science, technology, engineering, math really comes in. So we worked with Northeast State and the state of Tennessee and Eastman and Domtar to create the Regional Center for Advanced Manufacturing. We have an apprenticeship program now, and so as folks are beginning to retire out of some of these industries, we've got to backfill them with talented individuals. So we're trying to do that too.
Wow, you're a wealth of information. We've just scratched the surface.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got a lot more to talk about in just a minute.